Okay. So welcome to our Blockchain Commons Gordian developer meeting. We meet every month, at least once, the first Wednesday, in order to discuss the priorities for our community. For those of you who are not familiar with Blockchain Commons, we're a community interested in self-sovereign control of digital assets. Together, we bring stakeholders to collaboratively develop interoperable infrastructure. We design decentralized solutions where everyone wins. And we are a neutral not-for-profit to enable people to control their digital destiny. So I'm Christopher Allen. I'm the principal architect and executive director. These meetings are focused on expanding and using the Gordian specs to create a secure, compassionate infrastructure that is open and interoperable for all. Our big goals for 2023 are our DC board libraries, Gordian envelope, collaborative seed recovery, and setting a foundation for something we'll call collaborative key management with much more sophisticated cryptographic functionality. At our last meeting in beginning of June, we talked about updates to Shamir, some discussions about the ledger Shamir and verifiable secret sharing proposals that they had. We talked about moving from SSKR to the collaborative seed recovery. We had a brief demo discussion about Seed Hammer's product. We offered Gordian use cases for education and wellness, in particular providing privacy for those, and we announced the Gordian libraries for Rust. Today, we want to talk again about URs in general, and in particular animated QRs, so that is only part of it. We have Thunder Biscuit, who is going to be offering some experience with implementing UR and some discussion there. Craig, in particular, you started using LifeHash. We're trying to encourage more people to use that. I'd love to hear his story there, and in general, what are kind of the next steps for his work. We are going to be meeting at IETF if you're in San Francisco for the IETF 117 meeting. I wanted to talk a little bit about self-sovereignty. Wolf has a first sort of demo of collaborative seed recovery with Gordian Seed Tool. And then just in general, how are we going to standardize that? And what's our roadmap and priorities? We really need to hear from you. We're not a wallet company. We're here to support your wallets and tools. So returning to URs and animated QRs, we're working on, obviously like a lot of exciting stuff like envelopes, which use URs, but the existing URs continue to be the foundation for our success. So we have released a new developer document here, Uniform Resources and Introduction, where we talk a bit more in detail about what URs are and then lead you to other places. We also have another doc specifically on PSBTs and some examples of them. Hopefully we'll get some more wallets to support that functionality. And then we want to talk about animated QRs. We did this little video, a month and a half ago or so on animated QRs. And the basic idea here is, how does it actually work for a regular user? Why is it important? Why should they ask wallets to care? So we basically have in here, a video of a passport. I think we also have some stuff from Sparrow, but I'd really like to see this become something that the community can use and share and point people to say, hey, we support this interoperable functionality. So so my specific request there is that you either leverage the video we already have, we can give you the images or whatever to use for whatever your purposes are, or send us a little video or clip of your tool either generating or receiving animated QRs so that we can incorporate that and spread the word about that functionality. Does anybody have any questions on this? Okay. Thunder Biscuit, it's your turn.
All right.
You're welcome to share your screen if you like, or you can just walk through it.
Yeah, no, I mean, if I maybe if I have a few things, I'll share my screen, but I mean, it's not that I had much to say, I just thought I'd share insights. I showed up at the meeting last time, and my feeling was that you were overwhelmingly sort of looking for feedback and interested in hearing, experiences of developers looking into your stuff. So I thought, hey, I can tell them a little bit about it from my perspective. First of all, just want to say I'm a big fan of Blockchain Commons. I a while back sort of like learned about it because I went through learning Bitcoin from the command line, which had been recommended to me. So this was a fantastic resource. I'm the guy who opened the issue 555 on maybe porting all those markdown files into a sort of web book format or something. Still
cool.
Still going. And I maintain the language bindings for the Bitcoin development kit. So we produce bindings for Kotlin Android, Kotlin JVM, Swift, and Python. And I think Spotbit uses our language bindings, BDK
Okay.
Python. So that's how also I sort of like was looking at who was depending on our libraries, and I found Spotbit. I was like, oh man, this is Blockchain Commons. So I hope you're having a good time with the library. Yeah, so that's it. Also a big fan of Sparrow. So Craig.
Great. So a couple of questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. I'm an Android dev, so just wanted to say that too. So my expertise is I'm an Android engineer. I came into the Bitcoin development kit because I was a user, and then just ended up getting more and more involved.
So given limited resources last fall, we made a decision, or basically, among the financial sponsors of Blockchain Commons, everybody was really needing iOS for both Mac and iPhone, and Android support the most. Back-end stuff, things of that nature, people had a lot more flexibility, but those were the highest priorities. We had a really tough time deciding, do we do a Kotlin native implementation? There was some discussion about some tools that's, convert Swift to Kotlin. But ultimately we decided to bite the bullet and dive into Rust. But obviously we have a lot of, little details insofar as making sure that we're friendly with Kotlin. And we really would love your advice on all of our Gordian libraries to bind them, allow binding to Kotlin, in particular on Android. So any advice you have there?
For sure. I'm happy to talk about that at length, for sure. One of the cool things is that Kotlin and Java, of course, are interoperable. So I've been able to use some of Craig's libraries. So for example, my first contact with UR was with Hummingbird, which is developed by Craig. So that's how I ended up playing with my Jade. I had a Jade, and I was exploring other things that I wanted on mobile that are not offered by the Bitcoin development kit. And long story short, our bindings, one of the decisions we've made over the past few months is to limit the scope to only what is offered by the Rust Bitcoin development kit, because the Bitcoin development kit is fundamentally a Rust library, and it's sort of like dependencies. So that's Rust Miniscript and Rust Bitcoin. So the API that's offered to you if you're a Rust developer and you're using the Bitcoin development kit, that's what we expose, but we're getting requests for so much more than that for bindings, because everybody, if you're offering bindings for mobile, there's requirements for, of course, all the CoinJoin implementations, the BIP 21, there's BIP 47, there's message signing, there's all sorts of stuff people want. So one of the things we decided was to narrow our scope and stick with the Bitcoin development kit. But part of my role for this year is to expand our range of templates, documentation, and example libraries to produce bindings from Rust into, so like sort of following our journey a little bit and our approach, the tools that we're using. And for me, that included looking into what else I wanted on mobile. And the Bitcoin Dev Kit is just one part of that. So that's how I ended up into UR. But we have a whole workflow. We're using UniFFI RS. If you're not familiar with that, it's a library written in Rust developed by the Mozilla team. They use it because a lot of the Firefox features that they want to offer, like password manager, they have like bookmarks. They want to write that once in Rust, of course, and then have it available on iOS and Kotlin and Android. So that's how they ended up developing UniFFI RS. But it's a system that they're developing with sort of like plugins. So you can basically write your own plugins for different languages. So they have plugins for Python, Kotlin, Swift, but there's also different teams working on a C# and a Go implementation. So using UniFFI RS, you can produce bindings for a lot of languages. That's what we do. And frankly, starting from one of our templates, you can get something going in a few days kind of thing. I'm writing a whole example website that I can share later on.
Thank you. Now you say here that you're doing animated QRs. I do encourage you to do a PR. This is the developer community main page to add Cashew Wallet and which UR formats you support in here. So, but also, are you doing just PSBTs animated, or are you beginning to play around with it in other ways?
No, well, for me, it ended up being just sort of exploratory. I was wondering how I would do it if I was to do it. I wanted to learn more about it, and I don't have a wallet that does it right now. I was looking at whether it was the type of thing I should have in Rust and then expose in bindings, or if I should have in Kotlin directly for Android was my question. And then sort of like, you know, you go down the rabbit hole, and that's where I ended up. And but for this, what sort of brought me back to it, because I had looked at it a few months ago, and now what brought me back to it was a few weeks back, the guys at Cashew were saying, oh, you know, we need to, some of the tokens are too big for a single QR code. Does anybody know anything about this? What should I do? And then they picked some sort of like JS library that I don't know what it does really, but it's like not super sort of like foolproof. And so I just commented on the repo and said, well, I think by now the absolute standard of this, the way, if you want to skate where the puck is going, is the Blockchain Commons UR specification. But when I was trying to write this out, it's issue number 31 on the nuts for Cashew. You'll find that I actually had to write a whole thing and then realize like my links were all over the place, and then there's documentation, there's specification. Some of the feedback I got on the chat, people were like saying, no, this is their research. Where's the spec? I was like, no, the research is like, you know, it's in a repo called research, but it's actually the spec. And so that's what sort of got me thinking, hey, I should write this down, on these ideas down.
Great.
So I don't have a wallet myself, but yeah.
I know our intent is that as things get deployed, that we, you know, move them to another repo that is more spec-like. You know, or I mean,
or even start proposing RFCs.
Yeah, and BIPs and things of that nature. Some of it's been a resource problem, but some of it also is that we're really trying to focus on implement, you know, places where two or more companies are interoperable. Mm-hmm. So it gets out of research when there are two companies who are shipping something. But we also have to be careful. I mean, we ran into this problem where we did a demo in research of a animated PSBT, and you know, Blue Wallet immediately jumped on it, called it 1.0, and we weren't quite ready. So, where you know the improved version is the UR crypto PSBT. So we were only trying to figure out how do we transition to say, hey, this is, beyond just a demo, or we're, seeking feedback, which is why we released this, but actually to, a conformant standard. So for instance, I feel like crypto PSBT is really ready now to maybe be a BIP, especially now that I think both, as of like this week, both Sparrow and Seed Tool support the multipath descriptor versions of public keys and a few other things. So I think we've got a good, solid demo for that. But I really want to see animated QRs in a variety of other places, especially with things like foundation devices and other parties that are going to be coming out with air gap wallets that are independent, that we want to be able to support not just Bitcoin. I'd like to be able to have my signal key, for instance, on a air gap device rather than having it bound to my telephone number. So those are the kinds of things we'd like to be able to do. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but Craig, I noticed when I was with a recent update, there was a little tiny life hash, which I was very appreciative of. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about what, how was the experience of doing that? Have people noticed? Is it making a difference, making it easier for people? And then just in general, what's next with Sparrow? What's on your roadmap that other developers here in the Gordian community might be interested in? And then, who else is going to be implementing LifeHash? So, Craig?
Sure. Let me just make a few comments before I get into the LifeHash stuff. So first of all, Thunder Biscuit, thank you for your kind words. Much appreciated. Secondly, I just wanted to make a comment around the sort of the naming of the research repo, the finalizing of things into BIPs. I don't want to name any names, but I don't think that the UR spec is quite as is considered, should I say, quite as universal as you might imagine. And I think that if you feel it is ready to take to a more formal level of specification, then I would encourage you to do that sooner rather than later, because what I hate as an application developer is multiple specs that compromise the UX. That's, for me, the worst thing to have happen. And if we have multiple animated QR specs, then that will undoubtedly be the case, because ultimately you can only show one QR spec at a time. So I would just encourage the Blockchain Commons team to go ahead with that work if you are thinking about it, and to do it sooner rather than later, so that we have a more formal standard to rely on, rather than just pointing people at a repo called research. I just wanted to make that point.
Sure. So let me ask you a question, directly related to that. I mean, one of the issues here is that, for instance, the crypto PSBT portion of that is really the only part that is Bitcoin specific. So do we submit just that part as a BIP? Of course, they're going to say, but wait a second, that's encoded in URs. Oh, wait a second, that's a CBOR encoding. Oh, well, no, it's too complex, which is part of what, I don't know. I mean, and then, when we talk about the larger animated thing, should we we do have a repo. Shannon, what is the name of the repo that has the is it whips? There it is. This is where this is the repo that we intend to put them into, I think. So yeah.
Yeah. I don't have a particular view on the right place to sort of do it. I'm sure that you'll be better placed than me to determine it. It probably is true that a BIP is not the right place. But you know, if there was a more kind of you know, it would be ideal that if it was some kind of a shared sort of repository spec, you know, one where there was a general kind of industry view that this was something that everyone went to. I don't know whether such a thing exists much. You know, we have slips, not great. We have BIPs. I don't have any great ideas there, but at any rate, I just think it would be good to kind of make it a little bit more formal in the next few months. That's just kind of my thought on that.
You know, we've been developing a stack of technologies, and some of them are like crypto PSBT in particular, which is basically CBOR wrapped PSBT, is very specific to Bitcoin. But things that it depends on, like CBOR, which is already an RFC, which we adopted, and then DCBOR, deterministic CBOR, which is a profile CBOR that we are working with IETF CBOR working group to standardize, is kind of another layer. And then there's UR, which is, you know, a packaging method of you know, for CBOR based binary data, which could really be any binary data, but you know, it is based on CBOR headers and so on at a minimum. And that in that layer, that also includes the ability to create animated QR codes. So you know, so some of these things are very broadly applicable to a lot of things, and some of them are very specific to Bitcoin. And so you know, there's a question of how do we best publish these things, so you know, on a per spec, per implementation basis, so that the widest audience of people can rely on them.
Yeah, sure. And I think,
go ahead.
If I was to choose which one of those things I need that needs specification the most, I would say it is the sort of UR part, and in particular the particular method of creating the fountain codes. You know, there's a particular approach which, to my knowledge, hasn't really been very well documented. You know, there is a specific way in which it must be implemented, and you know, ultimately the only way that you can re-implement it is to read the source code and kind of take it from there. So that's kind of what I was thinking more of in terms of what needs a better spec.
Yeah, obviously the running code is the baseline, and you know, there's certain things that we say we depend on, like the Zoshiro 256 star pseudorandom number generator, you know, and those things are, you know, easy to find out there. But yeah, there's certain things where we're doing certain things for, like, you know, pseudo-random distributions and so on, where we've adopted well understood algorithms, but you know, we've implemented them ourselves, and you know, and we've converted this to several different languages now, or third parties have too, including Rust, and you know, it's all running the same across all platforms. So in a sense, the code is the spec, but I understand that, you know, a formal specification, that's a whole nother layer of effort that we have yet to undertake.
Yeah. Well, I definitely would like to, you know, part of the thing is we also have, you know, pretty strong architectural desire to keep a lot of these individual pieces unentangled, because they can be used in many different ways. So that's, you know, also contributes to the problem. So for instance, you know, you know, you might argue that the fountain code library might be useful for something else. So do we, you know, segregate that out, make that a separate spec just for the fountain code stuff, completely separate from URs? You know, URs uses byte words and other stuff. So it's yeah, we've got a little bit of a tangled thing. I think the architecture is good, but you're right, the documentation in particular as spec, we need to move forward.
Basically, the way this has been emerging is, you know, over the past several years, Christopher and I have been having conversations about the kind of duplicated effort in the blockchain and wallet community, and beyond that too, distributed identifiers, you know, verifiable credentials, things like that. And, you know, what are the problems they all share, and how can we start building this stack to address these problems one by one? And so, you know, that's how this has been kind of emerging. But we've been basically making it so it is very stratified. It's just also very there's a number of layers now that are meant to be severable, as Christopher mentioned, and trying to figure out how we make those available to the widest audience. That's the hardest part right now.
But anyhow, it is definitely on the roadmap. It's a pretty high priority. That's why we've kind of come back. That's why I was kind of back here saying, hey, we've got a newer UR intro for people. We have a newer PSBT doc. Both of those we welcome PRs to. That's basically, I believe, where is it? Yeah, here is the new intro, updated a bit. And then this is a brand new document that Shannon worked on. So, we welcome issues, suggestions, etc. Some of which Shannon and I can work on. Others will require Wolf to detail more. So let us know your requirements.
I think something that might help what Thunder Biscuit was saying in particular is that we are working on an outline for a new developer's website that's going to consolidate all of the information so that it's not scattered. And I don't know that that'll help with the specifications right now, but I've just written myself a note that we should at least have all the specifications well linked by then, so people will know the research is the right place. And it looks like Thunder Biscuit had a question, Chris, or a point.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think it's all going in very much in the same direction, but part of the feedback I wanted to provide was sort of in that vein. I wanted to say that it felt like at this point there's a lot of things, a lot of directions blockchain Commons been going into and doing specs and whatnot, but this one is like particularly sort of taken hold. And I felt like one way it could be helped was by having it a life of its own in terms of website documentation, that sort of thing, because it still feels like the UR thing is very much entangled with the internals of blockchain Commons. So for example, just the naming of the file is something like BCR 2020-005, and that's, I assume, metadata about when it was created, and it must have been the 5th in 2020. But you see a lot of these projects have their own sort of thing, and then from there you jump into maybe some of the documentation, like I saw you point at new docs there. That's really interesting, but similar to what you said, I guess they're a little bit everywhere, so you need to dig into blockchain Commons to find them, whereas you could buy urstandard.org or whatever, and then from there it'd be everything you need to know to implement this standard. Are you looking to get animated QR codes? This is where you start, and that would have been the one link I would have given, for example, the Cashew guys.
Okay.
Or started with myself. At this point, I'm familiar with the repos a little bit more, so I find my way through them. But I think I remember a few months ago when I was just like, where am I? And there was actually really interesting documentation, but in a few different places. I think that's a
great suggestion. I think we should have a single kind of jumping off place for our major standards that we feel like are ready for real deployment out there, like URs, including animated QR codes, and not too far off, Gordian envelope.
Yeah, Shannon, can you pull up the HackMD or send it in that you had on the developer site org? Because I will say we've been challenged that we're literally trying to design a new kind of unified subdomain. It would be like Gordian or developer.blockchaincommons. Do you have that URL, Shannon?
Yep. Hold on. All right. So if you want to pull this up, since you're screen sharing right now, I just put it over chat.
Okay. So yeah, so a lot of, as people have said, we have the crypto commons, we have the Gordian repo. Some people may not be familiar, but I've been writing at kind of a higher level, a series of musings on which are more of kind of my architectural approach and how we're thinking about these types of things. We have a whole bunch of videos. Obviously, there's the research repo. What are we trying to do? We want to support developers and people to show up. There's this smart custody problem that we've got because it gets entangled when we're trying to increase resilience and people don't understand what we mean by sort of a separation of, interests, things like single points of failure being different from, single points of failure, and single points of compromise are very, not exactly the same, and they cause, complications when you're designing things. So we ended up with like these three different approaches. One was kind of an operational thing, that, what is our architecture? What are the roles? What are the specific things within that? And how do they support our principles? And then, our various cases. Then there was a more topical oriented one, which would be, architecture, data formats, communication formats, key management. And then, a more entry oriented. You're a Bitcoin developer. Well, you're going to be interested in animated QRs. But if you're coming in from digital identity, you're interested in the SSI articles, or if you're doing layer 0 stuff, you would do there. So and then there's the principles one. So if any of you have advice of which of these 4 organizations you would think would work best and would have solved your problem when you're entry, especially somebody like Thunder Biscuit, who has just been browsing all of this, which one of these would have made your life easier, would help us?
Yeah, Christopher and I were kicking that back and forth just last week. So that's something that we're really wanting to get out there and to start helping people get to these specifications easier and all the docs.
So anyhow, back to Sparrow. What's going on with Sparrow, Craig? And why did you add LifeHash? And we're really glad you did, but you're the first one in the wild. We thought it would be useful.
Sure. So let me describe the use case, which is basically this. As most Bitcoiners know, we have the concept of a seed, and the seed is based on the BIP39 spec. And the BIP39 spec allows you to, in addition to your seed, your 12 or 24 words, you can specify a passphrase as a sort of a 25th word, if you will. Now, the interesting thing about the passphrase is that I consider it a relatively advanced feature because the user has to remember it, and it's not like a password in that there is no incorrect passphrase. Every single passphrase will create a new seed and thus will create a new wallet. So a UX issue that I was having in Sparrow was that users were creating new wallets with BIP39 seeds and passphrases, and then making a typo at some point, either when they created the wallet or when they loaded the wallet up and were forced to re-enter their passphrase, because the BIP39 spec makes it quite clear that the point of the passphrase is something that you have to remember. It's not something that is stored within the wallet. So that was creating a lot of questions, a lot of people getting upset because they were losing access to their funds, even if the answer was effectively stored in their head. If they just could remember the right passphrase, they could get access. But it was nevertheless an issue which needed to be addressed through some kind of UX mechanism. And the approach that, one of the approaches that I took, one of many actually, is to use the LifeHash. So what I do here is I take the master fingerprint as it is defined as the first 4 bytes of the master public key of the seed, and I use that in the LifeHash algorithm as an input to create this unique little image that gets shown on the screen as you type your passphrase in. So as you're entering your passphrase, so this LifeHash image will change and gives you the impression that your seed is actually changing with every key, because people don't understand that every single change you make to your passphrase is in fact creating a new seed. So it's kind of a visual indication of that. And then, of course, once you reach your correct passphrase, you can recognize that the life hash is the same one that you used, hopefully, when you created the wallet. And there's a prompt in Sparrow to suggest that you take note of, the colors and the shape of the life hash, so that when you re-enter your passphrase, you can identify it. And this kind of visual cue, I think, is a lot more easy for people to use than, for example, just showing the master fingerprint as, as a hex value. I think that, seeing that it's sort of a red mark with sort of 4 lines across it is just an easier thing to kind of deal with. And I think it has helped. It's not the only thing that I've done on the passphrase front, but I do think that it has helped people be a bit more confident when they use the passphrase feature.
Okay. Yeah, this is what we call the information block. So obviously, this is our reference 128-bit seed, test vector. And when we basically have, we know that it's a seed because it's a crypto seed. We know we give the seed a value because the seed is different than the master key. So we, especially because there can be other kinds of other ways to transform a seed into some kind of master other than BIP32.
Yeah, what you're seeing there is actually because whenever you produce a life hash, it does a SHA-256 of whatever data you give it. That is the last 7 digits of the SHA-256, and that pairs with the life hash. If one changes, the other changes. So it's meant to be kind of a second mode by which you can verify this. And the thing below it, though, is the fingerprint of the master key that would be derived from that seed. So
this should match what's in the descriptor if the descriptor is referring to the master key. Now, obviously, we'd love to work with people. I mean, I actually have it as another agenda item down the way, which is there's there's BIP38, there's BIP85, which wasn't on here, but that's another one, et cetera, that, how do we, be consistent to say, oh, it's got it's a derived key because it's got a password, or it's, a BIP85 and it's a different kind of derived key. It's, it's a seed that is now used for something else. And then, of course, there's, things now like BIP384. So we'll be talking about that more in a minute. But yeah, that was definitely, I'd like to come up with some better approaches so that we're everybody's kind of consistent in in some fashion as to, what do we show here? Like, I mean, I would love to, this is open source. I would love to see, more people maybe use this diagram to say, yeah, this is a seed, as opposed to, I mean, Wolf could probably do a demo at some point of Seed Tool, or maybe when he does his demo later, he can point out, we have a couple of other different types of things here to show, oh, this is a life hash of a public key. This is a life hash of something else. So.
Yeah, the object information blocker, OIB, is what that whole top level header is called. And, there we do have another BCR, another research document explaining, what we intend for each of these parts to be used, so that if people want to do something similar, we're not kind of stepping on each other's toes in terms of how we're kind of showing a life hash in combination with some other data that we want people to be able to easily identify.
But to be honest, I'm very uncomfortable with BIP38 because it's the #1 law among all the Bitcoin developers that I've spoken to when I did interviews for Smart Custody. That was the #1 failure, to the tunes of, millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin because of errors in BIP38. I just, anything we can do to make that better. And, your suggestion insofar as at least eliminating a certain class of errors But the fact that BIP38 doesn't have a checksum and some other, challenges with it make it, a security risk, not so much in compromise, but in, failure. So, but we need to do it. We need to figure out something there, because there are people who use it in sometimes very complicated ways, et cetera. So
I just wanted to be clear on why I used the master public fingerprint. Basically, Sparrow is built around output descriptors and PSBTs, and obviously the output descriptor contains that information. You don't always have the seed. In fact, you usually don't have the seed. You might be working with a hardware wallet or just a watch-only wallet, but you do have those 4 bytes, and that's why I use those 4 bytes. So in fact, the life hash is shown for every wallet in Sparrow. It's not only a passphrase thing. It was developed with that in mind, but in fact, if you load any wallet in Sparrow, you will see the life hash for those 4 bytes that are so integral to the output descriptor format.
Yeah, I think I basically have somewhere where I also talk about how to take a public key and derive a life hash image for it, but I'm not sure if we're in sync on that, but it may not matter. I'm not sure.
Yeah, in the key export in our reference tool, the seed tool, you can actually see a variety of different life hashes, and we have some iconography for it, and we even have life hashes for, and a little icon for it for like Bitcoin addresses and such. So but in the end, you as developers have unique needs for your particular approach. Obviously, a descriptor centric wallet is going to have descriptor centric information blocks. A seed focused thing like Seed Tool has seed focused information blocks. But I'd like to be just consistent, whenever you happen to derive, show a seed, or we show a descriptor or anything else like that, we're all consistent across these various things.
My hope would be that, for example, if you use Seed Tool, you'd say derive a private key, which is when you tell it to derive keys, it derives the private key first, and then you tell it to derive a public key along a certain path. It shows you a life hash for that, and we have documented the way that's done. It's not just the code, there's also documentation, and it'd be nice if somebody imported that public key into something else that they would see the same life hash. That's the intent or hope.
Anything in that particular UX area that you're planning on doing? It's on your roadmap, or what's the...
No, I mean, look, I do take the point that life hashes can be used in many different places. I think if we use them in too many different places, you're essentially putting the burden on the user to try and remember which life hash goes where. Was it the red one that applied to the wallet and the green one that applied to the key, or was it the other way around? People
This is why life hashes don't stand alone. That's why we developed the object information block, because it's a life hash is just part of identifying the object. The other elements here, which is a type, for example, the type icon and the fingerprint, the truncated fingerprint, and then the title. These are all intended to build a picture in a person's mind of a rapidly recognizable digital object. And so,
we're open for what this should, where, like I would say for the Bitcoin community, you are correct that, it's really the derived from the seed value, which we point to here, that is the one that is important. We might argue, you really ought to store the seed, but we don't, ultimately it's up to the wallet developers to make some decisions about those types of things. And if it's different, we'd like to help standardize this in whatever way possible for that.
But we've also documented how to display life hashes from keys, from BIP32 keys. So
Okay.
Yeah, sure. No, look, I take all of those points. I think you may be overestimating the conceptual framework of many users coming into this space for the first time. Do they understand really what a seed is? Do they understand what a public key is? Do they understand what a derivation path is?
No, I think the idea is more that, you know, if you do something in one tool and it's the same object, you should be able to recognize it in another tool visually. That's all. You know, that's the main point.
And also,
Agreed.
to be honest here,
agree.
I a month ago or a month and a half ago got into a long argument with, you know, some Bitcoin Core developers, former Bitcoin Core developers, I should say, because they didn't understand some aspects of the master seed that Bitcoin uses. And it was like, wow, you know, I mean, most people don't realize that, you know, BIP 39 words is basically a weird hack that actually uses the words to generate the hash, because it's the hexes of them or whatever. It's a real mess, and there are a lot of people, including the Trezor folk, who really hate BIP 38.
39.
Excuse me, BIP 39, and there are people like Peter Woolley, who wrote the spec, who basically goes, I kind of regret it in some ways because people are misusing it. So and that's developers, much less users. And, you know, that's kind of why we sort of settled on the, hey, you know, let's try to use one. We thought the seed was a better one for it, because one, it's, you know,
And yet when we derive the master key from our seed, which is just a pure random number, not derived from words or anything like that, we go through the BIP 39 seed stage, which is actually where we internally convert it, just the same way other people who use BIP 39 convert it to a mnemonic and then back, essentially internally. But we swept that all under the rug. So we're compatible with other websites and so on that do BIP 39 seed generation or key generation. So we're compatible, but it's like the redheaded stepchild. We don't have to talk about it.
yeah, well, the core people do not like, I mean, they basically say, no, just create a Bitcoin master key. Don't, you know, they call what we call the seed entropy, whereas I mean, I don't know, it's a mess. And when you start talking about outside the Bitcoin community, the Ethereum community is relatively anti BIP 38. And, you know, even and BIP 39 as well, for that matter, they only do one derivation. You know, they don't even do you know, more complex things. Which causes lots of problems, because they end up having the same key doing, you know, all the operations, authentication, transfer, et cetera, et cetera. So they even have it worse. So you know, I'd like to, you know, have the wallet community think hard about this and become better at it.
And I think Craig offered us two great things to think about. First of all, that if we do use life hashes for too many things, that we could be confusing the users. I think that's a very valid point, especially that they're not going to know the difference. And so they'll just be asking, why are these life hashes different? And the second is that a wallet might not have the seed and only the master key. And so we might be standardizing on the wrong thing. So.
But I do give that some fairly careful thought. And this is a conversation that I think we should continue to have with the developer community about how to, you know, obviously life hash isn't the only strategy for doing a visual hash. You know, I think it's fairly unique and has some unique uses. But, you know, the idea is the problem we tackle was not just, you know, we want everybody to use life hash, but how can we have people readily identify digital objects? You know, objects that have no form other than their numbers, you know, and that's, you know, and so the research we did, which we published, is basically, you know, our best answer to that at this time.
But again, you know, I think that you know, if we, even for people who don't use BIP 39, if, you know, we always in general for seeds recommended, you know, use the life hash of that to identify it. that might be useful. I don't know. We'll figure it out, but it's an important discussion.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, my comments have, even though we started off with BIP 39 and the passphrase, the actual application is completely BIP 39 independent, because it obviously is just the master fingerprint, which is defined by BIP 32. It's got nothing to do with BIP 39.
You're right, correct.
Yep.
So I don't know if anybody here is going to be at the IETF meeting in San Francisco. Or there's also IETF 118 in Prague. Anybody going to be attending that one? Well, we'll skip that for now, but basically, you know, we are trying to standardize the DC bore. We've had some acceptance. We'll know more in the CBOR discussion. So we have 15 minutes scheduled for that there. And then we're going to have a side meeting to talk about Gordian envelope and, you know, do we want to run that through IETF, or is it just another wallet improvement protocol type of spec? That's coming up. You know, obviously I've, been credited for popularizing the term self-sovereign identity and self-sovereignty in general. And there have been a variety of different interpretations of that and such. So I've tried to do some new articles on how, where are my origins around this type of thing. But in particular, this is kind of the self-sovereign community, computing thing kind of really fits in with a lot of the stuff that Blockchain Commons is talking about and things that we've talked about in Silicon Salon, et cetera. And I basically have a new analogy, metaphor for this, which is, you're on a digital journey on a vast and unpredictable digital sea. You want to stop being a passenger, you want to be a captain. And that one of the things is together as fleets, we can work together and have unity on the digital high seas. So if this is something that might, be interesting to help people explain self-sovereignty in a new way, I'd be interested in knowing if this was useful or not. So let me know if that's something that resonates for you or someone on your team. Wolf, I think it's your turn.
Hi. Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a bit about the progress we've been making on Gordian Seed Tool. We're getting closer and closer to our 1.6 release, which is going to include a number of improvements, particularly like the lower level architectural improvements, like including Gordian envelope and things like that. So we have videos up on Gordian envelope, what it is. It's built on DCBOR. It can be packaged as URs, the other things you've been talking about here. So you'll see me kind of go back and forth between all these things in the demo I'm about to do. And I want to, let's see, for some reason, when I'm not the host, I can't share a portion of my screen. And so I might have to flip back and forth. This is,
I made you a co-host in the hope that that solved that problem, but we'll find out.
Yeah. Actually, so I'm gonna, it looks like I can share multiple windows. So I'm gonna try sharing 3 windows here and see how that goes. You're gonna have to tell me how this looks. You should be seeing
3 windows all at once.
Okay, good. So you should be seeing, I don't know if they're arranged the way that in the middle, you see my actual physical phone.
Yes.
On the right-hand side, you see the iPhone simulator, and on the left-hand side, you see the terminal. And so I'm mostly going to switch back and forth between these 3 things. Gordian Seed Tool on my phone already has a number. I'm trying to click on my screen. I need to actually tap on my phone. Has a number of test seeds in it that I use for various things. The dark purple aqua love is our human blue, kind of our main test vector. I'm going to start though over on the simulator. I'm going to create a new seed. I'm going to just use the quick create function and create a new cryptographic seed. And I'm also going to, before I save it, I'm going to give it a note. And then I'm going to, oops, I think I dismissed it. Damn it. I'll have to figure out how to do it. Dragging down a sheet dismisses it. So, okay. Doesn't matter really. Click save. There we go. All right. So I have a new seed here. And again, this is the type, the fingerprint, the master key fingerprint, the name, which is editable. And of course, these things are all, there's several pieces of metadata here. There's the name, the creation date, and the note. And these three things are optional because the seed itself is just, in this case, 16 bytes of random data. And you can even see that here by authenticating on the actual device. It would ask you for your fingerprint or Face ID. And then if you just say share as hex, well, that's the actual seed right there. And it's hexadecimal. So, but obviously, because you're going to protect a lot of things with this, you want to back it up and you might want to derive keys from it and things like that. Real quickly, I'll go into the derived keys because this is something we've already kind of talked about in this meeting. So I just want to make sure, we're all kind of on the same page about it. There's a workflow here. It goes from top to bottom. So you start with your seed and then you enter some parameters like whether you're dealing with Bitcoin or Ethereum, whether you're on the mainnet or testnet, and what kind of key you're deriving. And so, for example, if I'm deriving a cosigner key here, you have a derivation path. And from that, you get the private HD key. Notice this has a specific life hash here. And also notice that this is is more filled out. It's red. It's a private key. It's marked as private key. It's a Bitcoin private key. It's a mainnet Bitcoin private key. And so all these things are being added to this to kind of, so that at a glance, it's not just a life hash. It's all these things. And so the whole idea is to give you a picture of what this this digital object is. From that, we derive the public HD key. And so this particular derivation path and turn public yields this. This is now green, says pub, same things here. And finally, the main address for this public HD key, which is right here. So, and all these are shareable. Notice we're also using color cues here. Like for example, the private HD key is sensitive. So if I say share this, all these are yellow, indicating this is sensitive information. By the way, the QR code is animating here because this is using the fountain codes from QR from our uniform resource UR library. So these QR codes never repeat. They're a fountain code, so they basically are based on the pseudo-random sequence, and you can dip into this fountain at any time. And the nice thing about it is you converge to the solution a lot faster than if you actually have to have a lossy like let's say a camera where you're missing QR codes and you're likely to take longer and longer to converge. So anyway, but some of them, if it's small, you don't need it. You don't need animation, but if it's big, then you do. But the reason why these are larger is because they are actually they're a Gordian envelope and they have all the metadata associated with them. So for example, if I say share as Gordian envelope, copied clipboard, and then I'm going to go over here to get pasteboard. Okay, so I'm going to go over here to the terminal, and then I'm going to type envelope, which is our command line tool, and I paste. And notice that what I copied from the simulator over there was this UR colon envelope. So UR basically this is a URI, like a URL, which begins with like HTTP or whatever. URs are self-contained. They don't point to things. They are things. And it's an envelope. This is a Gordian envelope, and this is the envelope tool. So if I put this particular kind of UR in it, it gives me a picture of what's inside that envelope. And so the key itself has 33 bytes. This is the subject of the envelope, is the key. All the other things are assertions about it. And that's kind of the general format of envelopes. There's type information. This is a BIP32 key. This is also a private key. So even if you don't know that you care about the 32 key, you can say, is this a private key? And say, yes, it's a private key. The asset that's associated with it is Bitcoin. That asset has type information as well, and it has a network. This is it's a mainnet, and this object is a network. And so I'm describing basically metadata. The nice thing about envelopes is you can have assertions, and you can have assertions on assertions. So this is subject, predicate, object, predicate, object, predicate, object. This particular object has its own assertions: predicate, object, and so on. It has a chain code because it's a BIP32 key. has a name. This is the actual name that's exported from Seed Tool. It has a parent. Now this is a crypto key path, which we've documented elsewhere. This is a CBOR structure, and this is CBOR tag. It's saying here, this is tagged as crypto key path. It's a CBOR map. Now, the envelope tool doesn't give you more information than that, but when you parse this as CBOR, you basically get the object of this assertion assertion, and then you can basically parse this as CBOR. So, okay, so and then parent fingerprint, which is just an integer. So basically, this is how we're kind of structuring keys now. This is a parallel spec with a crypto HD key, which is still fine. You can still use it. This is actually kind of more transparent. And the nice thing about envelopes is you can add things to them without disturbing what's in them to begin with.
You can also, make a version of this that say elides the private key, but gives public key information. You can, elide your transaction data if you're storing your transaction data in there, or only only keep the transaction data and the transaction details to give to your CPA, and you don't give the rest of the stuff. So
yeah, I mean, envelopes are basically
it's a
smart
wide
documents. They let you do holder-based elision, encryption, compression. They're basically a Merkle tree, so you can tell whether they've actually been semantically altered or not. And this is also partly why we want deterministic CBOR, because two people constructing envelopes in separate times and places, but with the same information, should actually construct the same bit for bit envelope. That's the goal. So so that's a big part of why we're pushing for deterministic CBOR as well. Okay, so that's the bit I want to talk about, kind of keys. Mostly we're going to talk about seeds now. So when you want to actually back up your seed, there's a couple of different ways of doing it. You can say, for example, back it up as a Gordian envelope. And so if I do that, then it just shows me a single QR code. It's not very big, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to my physical phone, tell it to, I want the video here, and it's going to point it at the QR code. And then you'll notice it's just imported that, and it's imported everything about it. It's imported the name, the creation date, and the notes. And so if I actually, again, I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to copy this as the envelope to the clipboard. Get pasteboard from over here. Let's look what a seed looks like. So this is a seed. It's the subject is 16 bytes. That's the actual seed. It is a seed. This is the creation date. This is the name. This is the note. And so again, these are the assertions that come with the seed kind of standard, but you can add your own. You can package this within other things, and you'll see how we do that in a moment here when we actually talk about SSKR. So, so as you can see, and this is basically, I displayed a Gordian envelope on one device and imported it on the other. If we actually go to the other option here, backup as SSKR multi-share, SSKR stands for sharded secret key reconstruction. And it allows you to basically distribute pieces of your key to a group of people without any of them being actually assuming they can't collude sufficiently, they can't actually reconstruct your key. And we have a spec for that. That's called crypto SSKR, which is a UR, just directly encoded as CBOR, and that's still usable. Gordian envelope is becoming our preferred way of doing this, because again, it has all these other things. Of course, you can also embed any CBOR in Gordian envelope. Envelope itself is a CBOR structure. So you start by choosing what kind of split you want. Let's say 3 to 5. So I have 5 friends, or say 3 friends, two friends and 2 coworkers and a spouse or something like that. And I want them to hold these shares, so any 3 of them can reconstruct my key. So I've chosen Gordian envelope. So I'm going to say next. Now the split has been performed. This split is basically ephemeral. So if I leave this page right now, the next time I come back with the same split, it's going to be split differently. So I want to make sure I get all my shares out of Gordian Seed Tool right now. We do have it on a roadmap to create kind of persistent exports. So if you want to do the split once and then take your time to distribute to other people, you can. But right now, it's important that when you're on this page, you get all your shares out of the app at the time. Did you have a comment, Christopher?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. All right. So anyway, but we do warn people about that. So, so for example, you can print your shares. And you see there's a preview here. You can decide whether you want a summary page on the front, which lists the key byte words from each share. You can decide whether you want the notes on that front page. And then the other pages essentially have the life hash, the object information block for the seed, and then the QR code, the byte words, and then the actual printed UR that would be exported. So these are the actual 5 shares, any 3 of which can reconstruct the seed and all its metadata. And that's what's important here, is because before I did the split here, I should have pointed this out. If you use the legacy UR, you only split the raw bytes of the seed, because SSKR has a limit up to 32 bytes, which is exactly how long a seed can be. And so you can split the seed, but you can't recover the metadata with that. All you split is the seed. The low-hanging fruit advantage of using Gordian envelope is all the metadata, name, notes, etc., will be split as well. And you'll see how that works in a moment here. So I'm going to go back here. Now I'm going to say, and of course you can copy them all to the clipboard at once if you just want to do it in one fell swoop. So you can just say copy to clipboard. And if I do that, all the URs will be copied in one step. But I'm going to go to export shares individually here. And here you see the 5 shares. There's 4 characteristic words for each share. And you can export them as various things. You can export them as pure byte words. You can export them as a QR code. You can write them to an NFC tag if your device supports that. So if I just show an envelope here, there's the UR of the envelope. Again, if I copy and pasted this over here, you'd see something similar. In fact, I'm going to do that because I want to show you that what you're going to see in a share is not the same thing you saw before when you saw a seed. So we go pasteboard, envelope. Okay, so here's the envelope for this. Now, what do we see? The subject of this is encrypted. So what's encrypted is this envelope, or something similar to, in fact, it is this envelope because it's the same seed, has been wrapped and then encrypted with an ephemeral key that has been split into SSKR shares. And each of these envelopes has a different SSKR share. So you're really distributing this smart document that has been embedded and encrypted with a split key. It takes a quorum of 3 keys to reconstruct the actual symmetric key that was used to encrypt the seed. So, so what I'm going to do to demo this is I'm going to instead display as QR codes, and I'm going to again take my phone, my physical phone over here, turn on the camera, and then I'm just going to scan the first QR code. And notice that it says recover from SSKR. It recognizes because it read the envelope and looks at these one assertion on it and says, oh, there's an SSKR share and there's an encrypted payload, an encrypted subject. And so I need 2 more because it was able to derive that information from what is available in that thing. So now I'm going to hide this one. I'm going to say show number 3. And there we got another segment, the middle segment lit. And let's go show number 4. Boom. And there it is. So, so you can see all the information is there, the name, the creation date, the note, it's all available there. And if these QR codes were too dense, they would start animating as well. And, you know, the seed tool on the other end can read them because that's what URs are for. You can put as much metadata as you want, and the QR codes will dance around and transmit the information in a very efficient way. And that is very, tolerant to a lossy channel like this.
Yeah, we also had a demo last month by Seedhammer where, they were able to get fairly dense QRs onto steel with their engraving device. And we're also going to work with them on how to have multiple QRs that are printed in some fashion, whether or not it's on steel or on waterproof paper or whatever, if you can't do animation. So we want to support offline keys. Obviously, these are URs, which means they're URLs. And since it's encrypted, this is actually reasonably safe to transmit, say, over a secure channel like Signal to your share partner. Or you can enter into a relationship with a service, which would encrypt it one more time. And, you would then be able to recover, use a third-party recovery service That's what you want to do.
Yep. So I just copied, this is actually is a long, it has a longer metadata on this one over here. So I just copied this from my physical device, paste it into the simulator, and you see how it's already recognizing this is here. I just copied and pasted the actual text URL UR across, and then it's giving me the preview, and then I say save. And so now I have this seed over here. I just copied and pasted the whole UR without splitting it. If I then want to split this one and say backup as multi-share and say 3 to 5, next, export shares individually, export as QR codes. If I show them, they're going to be dense or they're going to animate. And this is something I have to still fine tune before we do the next release. Is this should probably be animating now because it's pretty dense, but it's probably still readable. Let me just see if that's true.
But not with Sparrow, probably, and that's what we need to test.
Maybe
against.
not. Yeah, and well, that's the thing. Yeah, that's true. And of course, different cameras have different qualities. Yeah, this is pretty small right now. If I actually increase the size of the window, it probably could get to the point where it's readable. There we go. So yeah, so but the threshold at which you start to animate is tunable, and that is something that I'll be playing with before we do the 1.6 release. So, that's pretty much the demo. I just wanted to show you how we move back and forth between QR codes and this Gordian envelope and SSKR shares and all these kinds of things. It's all a very unified system. I think there's a lot of benefit for people considering who are considering adopting this. And, on our documentation for envelopes, we have a lot of examples, and Shannon has put together some really good user stories and use cases for it. We think it could be Gordian envelope could be really useful, both within and outside the blockchain community. Any questions?
So, sort of a quick, this is what we call an minimum viable architecture for CSR. There's a lot of capabilities, features, etc., that could be added to it, but we've kind of felt like this demonstrated a variety of important architectural features, but is unlikely to be exactly what you would choose to do. We also have some inclusion of descriptor metadata that is kind of minimal choices. And of course, we do the seed reconstruction. But there's still a lot more to consider, and we need your advice on prioritizing. I know Proxy and Bitmark both had this concept of a progressive SSKR split. We've identified some problems because SSKR is different every time you do it. So we have to have some persistent state until you've given your shares to whatever parties you wish to share to, and it's complete. So there's some questions of UI there. And then we've had a number of people who would like to have unencrypted metadata to assist recovery. So these would be things outside the envelope that might have some other details, maybe the fingerprint.
Right, not outside the envelope per se, but outside the actual sharded part of the envelope.
Correct.
Yeah. And again, that's one of the nice things about envelopes is you can mix and match encrypted parts, non-encrypted parts, sharded parts, non-sharded parts. It's very flexible.
Right. The other, things right now, Seed Tool does not support BIP38. And so we could define another UR type for a password that would be the BIP38, marked as being a BIP38 password. So you could, if you wanted to, you could add that to the envelope. Similarly, there's some weird scenarios where you could say, hey, you can get the master key, but in order to get the BIP38, you need to get one more share. So, it would be like 2 different splits, but not all the data is in both splits. There's BIP85 support, which I know we've had some people interested in, but causes its own complications because it's basically generating a new master key, but it's not actually generating a seed. which drives some other blockchains and people crazy. And then there's 384 is a new BIP for transaction data. So the name of the account that you've named it, all the transactions that you have done on it, who to, what level of privacy, etc.
By the way, I just remembered there's the other thing I did not demo, which is, which I could if you want, is the requests and responses using envelopes as well. So, and again, that's simply using Gordian envelopes as a way of conveying requests for, say, a seed based on a hash of a seed, or a key based on a derivation path and things like that. So it's a way of basically facilitating communications between devices where there's a series, one or more requests and responses involved. And again, the structures being passed are very flexible because they're envelopes.
The advantage to say Sparrow would be right now, Sparrow, when it's working with Seed Tool, says, go to this option, go to this option, go to this option, go to this option, and you get, you've got we can now get an account from you, or similarly. But instead, what it can do is just simply when it can just simply show a little QR code, which is pretty small, that says this initiates the whole thing, and it will basically just ask you, whatever, it doesn't have to be our tool, whatever tool, please, do this operation for me, sign a PSBT, or give me a cosigner key, because I want to prepare to do a create a descriptor for a multisig, or something of that nature, which should make it easier for everybody, because hypothetically there's no reason why foundation devices with their air gap device, or Kobo with their air gap device, or our iOS reference app could all use that same QR code, which will make life easier for everybody. But we really need your feedback on what to prioritize. So we're going to basically get this MVA out in the next few weeks, probably pause depending on what your roadmaps are when you're going to start implementing any of these features. I mean, if you tell us, hey, I can't get in to it until October or November, we may not do more than just get this reference app out and go back and do the rest of the Rust documentation, the other the other things that people were requesting. But we really need your feedback. So that's where we get to kind of the end of this call, which is I would like to kind of get a feeling from each of you, is there something coming up on your roadmap where you're seeking interop and are willing to do some effort there, and we will focus our efforts on those types of things. So I'm actually gonna Dario, this is I think your first call. Anything you want to introduce yourself and say anything about where you're interested in, or if you're just investigating, or if there's something that's a priority that we're not even thinking about?
Thank you, Chris. No, right now I don't have really too much to say, but my own interest is, I've been following you and the work that you guys are doing for a while, lurking, as it were, in the background. I've helped put together a hardware wallet team in the past. So, I have some sense for where the ledgers and Trezors and Bitboxes of the world are doing good and doing less good. So you guys are doing great work, and I'm trying to keep myself up to speed on the future. That's it.
Thank you. Nicholas? I know you are working with Kotlin. Thunder Biscuit.
Hey, well, for me, right now I'm focusing on a bit of Kotlin multi-platform thing. I think I see a lot of adoption for KMP in the industry, including some of the our clients for the Bitcoin development kit. Block is using it extensively in their new app, and I want to help support that and dig more into that. And so that's part of why I'm looking into UR and exploring how I can understand the standard more, and that's kind of where I'm at.
Okay.
I'm building my own sort of internal version of the documentation so that I can dig into it. And yeah,
You can always shoot me questions on Signal as well. I'm on Signal. I'm in the several of the blockchain commons. You can, just look me up there and send me questions about these specs, and I'd be happy to answer them.
cool. Yeah, I think I'll join the Signal group.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Craig, you're busy. Where are your priorities right now?
Yeah, as usual, I've got a lot of things on the go. I saw actually in the meeting, in the notes from one of the previous meetings, I think it may have been 2 or 3 previous, that the legacy message signing request that we put in at the start of the year, there's actually some work on that. I haven't unfortunately got time or had time to dig into it yet, but I do intend to do so and to see what came out. I obviously missed that meeting, but I'm intend to kind of dive into that and see what work was done there. Yeah, the only other thing to say is just to reiterate what I was saying earlier around, don't assume that UR is already the standard. I think that it was still early days, and if we have a different standard that comes to light, all of these things that are built on UR, like SSKR, have a lot less chance of succeeding. So, focusing and getting those specs out and getting the whole approach well documented is, I think, an important thing to focus on.
To be clear, SSKR is not in any way built on UR. UR is just one way of packaging SSKRs. Period. SSKR is entirely independent of URs.
Well,
below
sure.
it on the architectural layer. Yeah.
But Craig, one of the things I know, again, you've got a lot of, BIPs and various kinds of requests on your plate. I know for me, we've published some scenarios for how to do better multi-sig, which starts off with, give me a cosigner, give me a cosigner pub key. And from a variety of different kinds of devices. We would really like to see crypto request demo soon. And since we do not have a Bitcoin coordinator, ourselves, we need someone like you or Casa or Unchained or somebody else who's got a coordinator to implement that. And then, of course, we'd really like to see, crypto PBST move toward crypto request as well, or at least having that as an option, so that you can request other things besides signing PSBTs, such as legacy Bitcoin or other different types of things. Or are either of these, something that is a Q3 thing, a Q4 thing, beginning of next year? We're just trying to get a feel. And you don't, if you don't feel like you can commit to anything now, it's not a commitment. Just trying to get a feel.
Yeah, I mean, I try to focus on things that the users of Sparrow will want, and obviously they are interacting in a world with all of these hardware devices, and that's sort of the focus really is what devices are they interacting with. They're also obviously interacting with hot wallets, but here we're really talking about the interoperability between devices and a coordinator. So, without some kind of demand, and I understand your chicken and egg problem here, but without some kind of demand from the device side, am I going to invest a lot of time in building something which isn't supported on any device which is out there? It's it's also true to say that, you know, and this is maybe a broader philosophical point, is, you know, do I want users, you know, what is the sort of UX like when users, you know, exchange these QR codes between the device and the coordinator? What kind of a feel is that? I haven't really thought deeply about it. It feels quite different to what Sparrow is today. So it's not just a, you know, am I going to implement this feature kind of thing? It's also a, how does this fit into the broader overall UX architecture of what I'm trying to build here? Those questions feel a little way off to me right now, if I'm honest. It doesn't feel like an immediate need that people are asking for. So that's just the most honest answer that I can give. You know, it was certainly helpful seeing Wolf's demo today and getting a sense of what the sort of envelope can be used for, and that certainly might plant some more seeds, and we'll see where that goes. But I have no immediate plans. As I say, I think my next step is to look into the legacy message signing, which I think does involve the envelope, if I'm not mistaken, and that's perhaps the way in which I'll start to become more familiar with it.
Okay. So clearly, I mean, so Foundation Devices, you know, has a new app and tools associated with their product, and they have said that they're committed to moving in this direction. So it sounds like, you know, maybe the three of us should coordinate a little bit on, you know, on that. I know one of their particular interests is being able to, you know, back up shares. It'd be great if, you know, Sparrow could, you know, accept a share, even if it doesn't or transfer a seed and metadata safely to Foundation Devices and such. So that would be, you know, I don't know where they are in their roadmap, but that's of interest. I know that Unchained has been, you know, a blockchain commons sponsor for more than a year, because they really would just like to be able to throw up a QR code on the screen and basically initiate the whole process of doing things. So that's Unchained. CASA should be interested in that as well, but I've never been able to get them to come to one of these meetings. But they are supporting PSBT. I think they like it. They're, you know, another thing that, you know, people have asked us if we should do, and, you know, this, everybody can answer this one, is a, you know, a QR debugger. There's something kind of like the QR storage app that we had at one point as an experiment. But it would basically allow somebody to you know, go, is this legit? Is this cute? You know, there's been some people go, well, I don't know what's in that QR. And we could offer something at, you know, for the general public, would just simply help identify what this is that's you know, somebody's trying to send you, and is it conformant in various ways. And then for developers, you click a switch and it'll basically help you debug all of this. Is any of that of interest to any of you right now as our priority, or do we save it till the fall?
I think I would certainly be interested to support any of the feature development that the various entities that you mentioned are doing, you know, whether Foundation is doing something or Unchained. That's certainly something I would look to try and support. So keen to hear more as and when that happens.
Great. Okay. Well, it's 11:34, so we're a little bit past our hour and a half, but I wanted to thank everybody for being here today. Obviously, you know, if you can talk to me on Signal, all of us on Signal, or on Twitter through Christopher A. And we look forward to more details in August. So in August, we're going to do an Asia-friendly time zone again, and then in September we'll do back to EU, and so we're going to go back and forth for a little while. You know, see how it settles out. So we clearly have some you know, European parties in this call, and of course all of this stuff we will excerpt key portions to our YouTube channel. Well, thank you again very much. Thank you, Wolf. Thank you, Shannon, and we'll talk to you in a month.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
Thank
great
you.
talking to.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.